All right, hello everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Todd McGee. I'm the president of the National Association of County Information Officers, and I want to welcome everybody to our webinar. And thank you all for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. I've just got a couple of housekeeping items to go through, and then we're going to go ahead and turn it over to our guest speaker. First off, we want to just give everybody a little bit update on NACIO business. Then we're going to get to our webinar on writing communications and marketing plans. And then we'll hear from Dr. Lambiase about the TCU Certified Public Communicator Program. Just a couple of upcoming events I want everybody all the members to be aware of. We're going to be rescinding the renewal notices for next year sometime in November. In January, be on the lookout for our Awards of Excellence nominee information. That should be going out then. For those of you who get to go to the NACO Legislative Conference in March, that's going to be March 2nd through the 6th this year in Washington, D.C., and then the NACIO business membership meeting and the roundtable discussion on media relations are both going to be on Sunday, March 2nd. The business meeting from 8 to 10 a.m. and the roundtable discussion on media relations beginning at 1:30 in the afternoon. So if you're going to be able to make it to the NACO Legislative Conference, I hope you'll be able to join us for those two events. Before we get started, I just want to give everybody a couple of maps. This shows the states in blue are the states where NACIO has members. So as you can see, we've got quite a few states covered there. And then the states that are in blue on this graphic are for states where people have signed up to listen to the webinar. So again, you can see the challenges that we have when we're a nationwide organization and our members don't have large travel budgets. Webinars are probably an excellent way for us to reach out to our members, so we hope to be continuing to do more of these. Some of you may be aware of that the last couple of days we've been conducting a survey of county managers across the country, and we've gotten responses back from about a dozen states. I've gotten lists of county managers from my counterparts in about a dozen states, and we've been asking them a lot of questions about how counties communicate with their citizens, and in particular I'm interested into learning about how counties that don't have public information officers communicate with their citizens. And so this is just a chart here that shows this was after 143 respondents. 140 had county websites, so that's almost every county now has a website, which is good. More than half are on Facebook. Almost all of them are using some sort of news releases to the local media. We have quite a few using Twitter and YouTube, some doing electronic mail, electronic newsletters to citizens, and others doing other things like direct mail and other kinds of communications. And then also I asked them what kinds of media come to your Board of County Commissioners or Supervisors meetings regularly. And you can see that newspapers, almost 3/4 of the county say a newspaper is at every one of their board meetings. So again, all this information right here leads me to realize again how important it is that counties that have public information offices, and really how every county could benefit from having a PIO. So I just wanted to share some of that information with you. Before we get to our new program, today's topic is going to be on writing communications and marketing plans. We're going to go ahead and proceed with that now. Our guest speaker is Dr. Jacqueline Lambiase. She's from the Texas Christian University Schieffer School of Journalism. She is the Associate Professor of Strategic Communication in the school, and she is co-director of the Certified Public Communicator Program, which they've created in partnership with the Texas Association of Municipal Information Officers. And this is a very exciting program. It is really in-depth, detailed training for public information officers for public agencies. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lambiase and let her start running the program.
Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here with you today, and I just clicked on show my screen, so I hope that it's showing. And I want to first start off by saying how hard it is to actually write a really great communication plan. It's probably one of the toughest things that practitioners do is to do that. And so some of the things that we'll discuss today aren't easy things to do. And really what it is trying to bring a lot of things under control and be more deliberative about what we're doing instead of just reacting to the environment around us. And sometimes that's easier said than done. The first thing that we'll start with is just taking stock of the assets that you already have in your counties And these are maybe pieces of a future plan, or perhaps these are pieces of an existing plan that you have. So I'm going to talk sort of a little bit about how to write a plan from scratch, but also how to revise perhaps an existing plan that you already have. You may have inherited it from a predecessor. It may be something that you wrote but that needs updating, so we'll try to touch on all those things together. The parts that that you may already have are these parts. They are the vision, mission, and value statements that perhaps are provided by your strategic plan that a county may have. They may be statements that you have on your website or in other documents, and so you've got those sitting there ready to help you serve sort of as an umbrella under which you will build a plan. And if you don't have those pieces, it's a really great thing to sit down and have meetings and work through a process to gain those pieces, like what are we here for, what are our values, how do we want to move forward with all the things that we do, whether it's a communication plan or any of the programming that you're in charge of. You have goals already and promises and ideals that you're shooting for. Those, of course, become part of any kind of plan that you're going to do. Again, you may have a county strategic plan that you're working with. And then I want to talk a little bit about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. These are something that perhaps you put together on a quarterly basis. They may not be something that you're routinely doing, but you do from time to time. And they're really important to do in terms of taking stock of all the challenges that your county faces. You may be the only person who does this kind of thing for the entire organization. I suspect that you have people who may work for your transportation departments or other entities, county parks, who may do that for their various area of responsibility, but you might be the only person who does this for your entire organization, where you're looking across all of the things that you do. And I think this is really an important part of the process, is to see where you have opportunities that you might not be taking advantage of, where there may be some threats over the horizon. So I think that's an important thing to do as you embark on this process of either revising a plan or writing a plan from scratch. Arlington, Texas, which is where I live, they call these things horizon issues, those possible threats or opportunities that are sort of in the future. I think you could also call them sticky wickets. And so this is a screen grab from a video that they've published fairly recently, in which they're trying to describe the budget in less than 7 minutes. And they talk about these sort of long-term strategic challenges or horizon issues. And here's an example of what those are. And these may be things that you are also faced with. And so I think your communication plan can begin to think about how you're going to work toward these challenges and communicate with citizens about them. So regional mobility, organizational viability, natural resource management, a lot of things that I'm sure that you are facing right now. Some other parts that you may already have that you can gather together as you're getting ready for this process of revision or writing would be to look at old plans or existing plans or aging plans. I'm sure you have some sort of crisis communication plan, or you may be part of some kind of regional entity that has a crisis communication protocol. That would be something that you would definitely want to make sure you are accounting for in this plan. You may already have some social media policies or guidelines, or some nascent guidelines that you'd like to build out. That would be part of the plan. You might, work for a couple of weeks figuring out all the places that your county entity has a touch point with citizens. So any daily interfaces with citizens. These might be customer service types of interfaces, or any number of meetings or public hearings, those sorts of things. You want to make sure that those are accounted for in the plan as well. You might take stock of physical spaces where people are, at, whether that's a county courthouse, a city hall, or another, place or space where people gather and have interaction with county employees. You want to think about those spaces too, especially if you're thinking about a comprehensive communication plan. And then, of course, citizens. You have to think about them all the time. Other parts that may already exist. There might be other communicators within your county, people who talk about roads, or subject matter experts who do a good job. You want to make sure that you're including all the voices that you have, other plans from around the region. all these elected officials that you're working with and for, and some of their personal crusades, you're going to obviously have to take some of that into account. Other existing initiatives within the departments and programs that you have, those would be other parts. So you can see, you know, just in a few slides, we've talked about a lot of existing pieces of potential planning that are around you that you could hopefully merge together and synthesize into a comprehensive document. And really, it's kind of like herding cats. So that's why I've got the herding cats picture. It's not easy to do this. It's not easy to be the person to bring all these pieces together. A lot of times people are going rogue or enjoy going rogue or enjoy being off in their own little area and working on their own and not really having to think about other people. And it's really difficult sometimes to bring all these speakers and voices and ideas together in one place. But I think the benefits are great. And part of the process of writing this plan can be sort of having these meetings or discussions, fostering that dialogue to help you build a plan, and allowing all those people to come together to think about how can you work in a more coordinated fashion. So, you know, many of the parts may be thought of kind of as environmental scanning or formative research, and these, of course, are the first steps in a lot of planning or strategic planning in sort of a classic textbook sense. So the process could look like the bullets down the left side or the bullets on the right. And environmental scanning is kind of what you would do if you pulled all those pieces together that we've just talked about. And then you may realize that you need to do some research. Todd spoke a little bit earlier about doing a survey. You might want to have sort of informal focus groups or informal surveys of your employees or of leaders in the programs that you have or agencies or parts that you have. So you may do the environmental scanning, and that might lead you directly into research. Then you would do the hard work of planning or setting objectives. And then you would actually move into message design and execution and the programming that you've planned. And of course, the last step of both of these processes is evaluation. And you would need to build evaluation in from the very beginning to figure out, once you've laid down a plan, such as, you know, we would like to have positive interactions with all citizens as much as possible, you would also want to build in some way to measure that. And that might be through a citizen satisfaction survey that you do every couple of years or something like that to see how you're doing. You might need to start off with a benchmark survey to see how you're doing right now. And then once you see the results of that kind of research, you could build into your evaluation that you would want to make improvements to that. So here's a toolbox of things that you can use as part of planning. One might be a huge database where you gather all the parts that we've talked about and where you begin actually writing sort of a draft of the plan. You're going to be spending a lot of time listening, so your ears are definitely great tools in terms of listening to the research and also gathering information through focus group surveys. You could do kind of a road show where if you have a large county or a county that has several different offices or locations, you could go to all of those offices and locations and talk to people who have contact with citizens, or talk to people who are involved in daily interactions with citizens too. And you'll do a lot of listening and that kind of thing. And you'll also build in a lot of people into the process, and then they will have bought into having a comprehensive communication plan. There are things called Gantt charts and PERT charts where you can Google those. And Gantt charts are good for smaller projects that last less than 30 days, but a PERT chart is better for complex projects. And so you can think about some of those performance and programming evaluation systems where you can put things into boxes and make sense of things. They both use task, time frames, and dependencies. So, and task is pretty easy to understand. The time frame is when you want to execute this part of the plan. A dependency would be something like a resource dependency where you need other people to help you and to provide resources for you. So who are those partners? Where are those partnerships? Who needs to be included in this project? And then, of course, both have, you know, references to budgeting. So how many people do you need to help carry out this broad comprehensive communication plan or this short-term project? what are the hard costs and soft costs of doing that? So I want to take a deep breath. So I've dumped a lot of information on you, and I want to talk about this sort of traditional communication model, because I think this is something that most of us learned when we went to high school or college. If you talked about sort of a linear communication model, you had a sender and a channel and a message and a receiver and then feedback. Or you might have been introduced to a model like the one that's on the screen now, where your city or county is in the middle of this model and you're communicating with all these different stakeholders. We haven't talked a lot about all the stakeholders that you're trying to deal with, so let's talk about them now, because they belong, of course, in parts of these plans. The traditional model might have all these groups around the rim and your county in the center. And I want to say to you that I think this kind of communication model, I think, maybe has always been a mistake, but especially in the age of digital and social communication, I think we need to think about it differently. And so I want to just click the screen over to something that looks very similar, but that is quite different. And at the center of this model is discussion. And you and your county are also out there on the rim with everybody else. And I think discussion matters a lot in terms of what people are talking about, what the community needs are. That discussion's going on all the time, and sometimes people may be directly referring to the county or to other governmental bodies or agencies, or they might not. But there's an ongoing discussion about community activities, community strengths and weaknesses, and those sorts of things, and you want to be a thought leader in that discussion. And so I think you have to figure out a way to continue to check into that discussion, and you probably already have good listening systems for that. You may already be doing these things, but I just want to talk about it a little bit more deliberately, where the discussion serves at the center of everything, and everything that you do is based on what people need and what citizens are calling for. And so if you make discussion at the center of this process, then I think you'll build a plan that is responsive to many of those stakeholders, because you've already been listening to them closely. So why do you want to do this? Why do we want to plan? Why do we want to go through all of these steps and write a plan and then try to follow a plan as diligently as possible and track our progress? Because that is very difficult. And I think that there's, at least these 5 things that make planning make sense. You want to keep communication in line with the county values, mission, and goals. And to do that, you need to know what kind of communication and messaging is going out and make plans for it so that it's not just organically built, and sometimes it might be on your mission and sometimes not. We know that tone when you're speaking matters a lot in a crisis. We know that a lot of the work that you do can save people's lives in a crisis or an emergency. And so what you're doing is very important. So you want to make sure that it's all lined up with goals. And maybe one of those goals is keeping citizens safe, or having a safe county, or safe transportation, or whatever. You want to proactively manage issues instead of reacting to them. And so you don't want to be caught off guard and just responding all the time and in reaction mode. You want to be a thought leader. You want to have your thoughts and words out there ahead of things instead of behind them. Planning helps us understand what we know and what we don't know. And so if we plan and we begin to enact our plan and then we realize there's a gap, we suddenly find ourselves doing things that aren't in the plan, well, maybe you should be doing those things, but it helps you realize that, oh, I didn't really think about this, and I need to go back and set a protocol for handling this over and over again, so that if I'm on vacation or somebody's not here, they'll know how to handle this too, and it will be handled in a consistent way. You want to build consensus, and you want to manage your city or county resources in the best way possible to be accountable to taxpayers. So planning is really important. I taught a class this summer with a couple of people from cities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and one of them was like, why are we doing this planning? And he was handling a new recycling program for a city, and he was, suddenly at some point he just slapped himself on the head and said, I get it now. I see why we have to do this. And part of his reasoning was he had certain tasks that he has to get done as part of his new recycling program, but he was constantly being pulled away from what he thought was his core work to do sort of side things. And he saw planning as a way to make sure that the most important things got taken care of first, with the most resources and with the most consistent focus, and then he didn't get pulled away on too many side projects. It gave him an out, in other words, to set those side projects aside and to be more thoughtful about the things that he had been hired to do. One thing that communication planning can really help you with is it helps you sort of figure out all the pieces of a very complex organization like a county or a city. And so you can map these areas or territories. You know, one of the places that I think a comprehensive communication plan can help you most is with law enforcement. I know that there can be problems between a county and perhaps county law enforcement or the sheriff's office or city communicators and then a city police department, because they kind of coexist, but they're almost like separate entities. And you know, I think sometimes the law enforcement folks sometimes trump everybody else. And I think one thing that comprehensive planning can help you do is to map those territories. They already exist, so go ahead and get that down on paper, but find places where there is some good overlap. Find places where you can work more in partnership and begin to build rapport with folks inside other parts of county operations. So I think that's a really important aspect of it. It helps also sort of to delineate what your job is versus what other people's jobs are. And so if you've had some difficulties with sometimes people speaking out of turn, or you've tried to keep it down to one spokesperson because that's good practice, but sometimes other people pop up and start talking, kind of helps everybody know that that's really not the way things should happen, and it gives you a little bit of leverage for that. And again, it helps you kind of stick with your goals and mission instead of going off on some stray issues, like the example I gave a little bit earlier on the recycling problems of this guy getting pulled away from his work on that. And if you don't have a strategic plan, then really it's, you know, communication is just one damn tactic after another. You're just doing another newsletter, another web page, another interview for the radio, and you're maybe, you know, another tweet, but there's nothing that ties them all together. There's nothing that, for the most part, makes your communication consistent and in the same tone and building a great communication system for the county. So you don't really want that to happen. And so here's what full body plans need. They need really lofty and ambitious goals, but these goals are always tied back in with that mission, vision, and values. So you're going to start with some lofty, idealistic thinking. This is the kind of thing that you don't want to shut the door on and say, we can't do that. I think you try to have some lofty goals. Underneath those goals, you are going to have measurable and specific objectives that help you aim at those ideals. So you'll have objectives under that, and under those objectives you may have several different strategies which help you with what stakeholders you want to address, the kind of channel you want to use, the tone you want to use, and then under that are tactics, and those are actually the messages or speeches, things that you're writing that go along with the things above. And that, of course, spells G-O-S-T, spells ghost. Plans are built with all kinds of different labels. This is just one typical labeling system that you could use. Otherwise, if these things aren't kind of lined up like pearls on a string where each one leads to the other, they're all consistently done, you have some routines. And routines aren't bad things. You probably already have protocols and daily habits that you go through, or weekly habits that you go through, where you might have a meeting on a Monday and you're talking to everybody about what we have to do this week. That's perfectly fine. Part of planning, I think, is getting those routines or protocols down in writing so that everybody knows what they are, so that it's transparent how this engine of communication works. So that leads me to the next topic, which is there's really two ways to build a plan. There's two ways to build a plan, and one is to replicate prior plans or to build one from scratch, which is sort of analyzing those routines or using existing tactics. And so the steps would be some things that we've already talked about today, which would be, updating an existing plan or an old plan, completing an audit, collecting all of those pieces that we've talked about earlier, and all the kinds of communication that you may already be using. So that might be citizen meetings or newsletters or the website or bill paying or things like that, or social media accounts. So you may have a lot of tactics that you're already doing, and you could maybe list all of those on a Post-it note and stick those on the wall to figure out everything you're doing in terms of communication, and that would be your tactics at the bottom of that list of GOST tactics. You might build from tactics and try to figure out what the strategies are behind those tactics, or write new strategies and build from the bottom up, from tactics to strategies, from strategies to those measurable objectives back up to your goal. And what might happen is you may have some things on those Post-it notes, you may have some tactics that you're doing that really don't fit anything. And it might give you a way to get rid of some things you don't need to do anymore that really aren't giving you a good return on your investment of time and money. So that's one way to build a plan. And there's another way to build it, which I think is a little bit harder, but also, sometimes what you have to do, which is, if you feel like old plans aren't serving you well, or existing plans aren't, or you just need a new plan, is just to sort of scrap everything and start fresh. And I think the first step would be to kind of learn about the culture that you're in, the communication culture, and meet it in its best form of reality. And this is sort of modeled by some top-forming departments or programs within your county. And you get this input from all stakeholders, and we've already talked about that today. And then you sort of build a cultural, communication cultural framework around all the existing routines that you have and that you want to keep. And then you kind of put this best culture or new culture down on paper. I'm going to talk quickly so we can get to some questions about a case study that you could learn more about. It's called Brand Colorado, and the state of Colorado is in the middle of a 2-year planning and execution process of rebuilding its brand, and this is the new logo that they'll be using. And they discovered that all of the agencies across the state of Colorado had a zillion different kinds of logos and other things. And so they went through this 2-year effort. It ends next summer, and they decided that they were really going to focus on trade, tourism, and travel, and they were trying to unify these 22 agencies in the way that the branding looked in terms of the actual logos that they used, but also in the things that they were doing and saying, so that they were kind of all on the same communication page. They actually worked with people from across the state and got a lot of donation and pro bono work from local PR and ad agencies. They had a teen advisory group. They did a road show and talked to a lot of different stakeholders from all over the place. They did some survey research, which is how they started with research, and they figured out that this flag of the state of Colorado that has a big C on it, a lot of people thought that that meant Chicago and not Colorado, so they realized that the flag maybe wasn't a great thing to use for the state symbol, but that their license plate, which has long been the green and white license plate with the mountains, that had a lot of brand identity and brand recall. And so that's how they, revised their logo and, really put a lot of effort into this rollout that they're starting now. They're sort of implementing the plan right now and redoing logos, and then they'll start actually communicating with this one voice approach coming up in the next 12 months. So I think that's a great story. You can, of course, do some Google searches and find some great videos and other collateral that they've done as part of this. A couple other things that you can kind of do to get started, because I know that this is a lot to think about, but you could kind of do something called a channel quest, which is to build this model of all the pathways inside and outside your organization. So how does information flow in and out of your organization? What channels are used? And again, that might mean you build this Post-it note chart or something like that. And then the other thing you could do is sort of a content quest, is kind of do an audit of every public-facing content that you have. What does that look like? What does it sound like? Does it sound consistent? How could some of that be rewritten in a more consistent fashion? How can everybody kind of use the same taglines or the same friendliness if that's the kind of tone you want to set? And I think that's really worthwhile as well, is to dig into the content to see what it kind of looks and sounds like. Some other key questions as we wrap things up here would be, what kind of organization do you have right now in terms of communication? Do you have a real centralized organizational structure right now where all communication comes through one area, must be approved through the same one or two people or one or two departments? Some organizations have that. Even though there might be 2 or 3 different Twitter accounts or something, that's very well planned out, very controlled, and that's a good thing for some organizations to be centralized. Some counties and some cities have a more decentralized organization. Sometimes that's a planned thing, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes things have just grown bigger organically, and it's gotten decentralized, and maybe that's a good thing, but maybe it's not. And so I think trying to label what you have right now is super important. You want to look at how many programs or departments communicate with external stakeholders. So you want to think about that external piece, but then you also want to look inward and make sure that your internal communication is working well. So if you have a centralized system, how is that built and how is it controlled, and what improvements might be needed? And I thought we could just look at one goal here. A big overarching idealistic goal might be being available whenever citizens require key interaction with or important information from government. That might be your top goal for your organization, and then you're going to write objectives under that in terms of response time, in terms of responding to media inquiries, how much time should pass on that, measurable goals for that, for instance. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a goal. So I thought I would kind of throw that up there for you as kind of a starting place for when you sit down to maybe start some of this process. And I'm now open for questions and discussion, and look forward to listening and talking to you about questions you might have.
All right, thanks a lot, Dr. Lambiese. There was one question that came in from on the chat room from Deborah Tingley in Pennsylvania. Says, do you think it is possible to do this plan by a committee? And if so, do you believe that it does not have to be chaired by a public relations or communications person, because anybody could be the leader on this topic?
I really do think anybody could be the leader on this topic if they have sort of a good communication sense about them. I'm thinking here of, I'm not going to think of his name, Patrick Swanton, who is a City of Waco police officer. And when we had the explosion this past spring in West Texas, which is just south of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, he just went to the site of the explosion and began handling all the media relations because that little town was overwhelmed by media. And he just stepped right in and has such a great demeanor, such an open demeanor, just stepped right in and did that beautifully for about a day until the state got somebody there to take over. And I think he's the kind of person who came in as the SWAT team member on the police force, doesn't have a communication background, but has a real sort of instinct for how to handle interactions with the public. So I think somebody like that could lead it. I think, of course, a communicator, if you have somebody who's got that skill set and that sort of theoretical background as a member of the team, that would be very helpful, of course. But I think if you can look at plans on the web, they're all out there. There's a ton of great examples of comprehensive communication programs for counties and cities and school districts. And I think if you can kind of look through those and get a sense of what a good plan looks like, that's not too big and too overwhelming, that looks like something you'd like to build for your organization. And maybe you have a committee of people who start that sort of research. And they kind of go, we kind of want to aim for this, then I think a lot of people could lead that kind of discussion. Somebody who has a really good strategic mind could do it.
All right, and then another question that has come in is, do you feel branding is really necessary for a local government?
I really do. I mean, I think I'm thinking here of College Park, Maryland, which has a terrible tagline, and I think it's something like a livable city. And yeah, great, it's livable. So is a tent. So is a cave. You can live there, but do you really want to? And so, my daughter goes to the University of Maryland, so we laugh about that tagline all the time. And I think it's still on signs, but I think they've dropped it maybe. So I think, cities and counties have always felt like they kind of need that, but I just really feel like it's an expectation from citizens and an expectation from the public that you have an identity of some kind. What is your identity? The public has a perception of you. That exists no matter what you do. And so wouldn't it be better to shape that, to go ahead and say, this is what we want to be, and to set that goal for every person on your team? I think that's one way to look at branding. It's to set a high standard, to remind people each and every day why they are there, that you are a public servant, which is a tough job, and that you want those interactions to go as well as they can all the time, that you're good stewards of tax money. I think those are the kinds of sentiment that you could put in branding, and that might be just a simple, the name of your county, along with a short tagline about, about that sort of thing. So I think it's a worthwhile effort. I mean, I think it's a way to build a culture that matters, build a culture that works well.
All right, thanks for that. We have another question come in, and I would also like to just tell everybody out there, if you'd like to actually speak to Dr. Lambiase, you can just raise your hand, and if you have a microphone connected to your computer, or if you're on the phone, we can unmute you and you'll be able to ask a question that way. But Kurt Kephart has asked, do you have examples of a communications analysis process map?
I sure do. I could certainly send them to you, Todd, and you could share them with the group.
Okay, that'd be great. We can put them on the website.
Be happy to do that.
Right.
Yes.
How long of the process is it to, how long do you think someone should allocate to go through this entire process?
I think it can be a long process. What we're doing right now with a cohort of people that we're working with 28 people from across the state of Texas. Most of them are city, county, or public safety communicators. And we're working with them on a year-long process, and they're actually writing a 3-year plan. And so some of them already had some of the pieces that I talked about earlier in the presentation. Some of them have to go out and get those. And so it kind of depends on where you're starting from. But, I think it's probably a 3 to 6 month process of gathering information, of beginning to write some drafts, of putting things together, and then maybe, putting a short, small plan out there as kind of a beta to see how it works. And then, staying in contact with the small group that, is giving input to see how things are working, and you may have some revisions going on for another 3 to 6 months. The process in Colorado was a 2-year process, and that's, of course, a huge entity with a lot of moving pieces. But you know what? Counties and cities are just as complex. I really think they are, or they can be. And so, I think give yourself a lot of time to start some discussion, to kind of organically build relationships. I can't say enough about getting as many people on board, which seems unwieldy at first, but you could have 2 types of advisory committees that have input. You could have a smaller committee of just 3 or 4 people who actually write the plan or work on it the most, but you could have also another larger advisory group of maybe 10 to 15 individuals. Some of that maybe could include a citizen advisory council as well, or something like that, where you get input, you talk about things more broadly, big picture things with them, and then the small committee gets busy and writes it up, and then you check in with those larger groups, on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, to kind of let them know where you are, to get some input, to let them look at how things are working.
Okay, we've got a couple of more questions come in, and Linda Van Zant was hit on the point that I was going to make. How can we ensure that a communications plan, or any plan, does not just sit on a shelf or on a computer drive? What kind of follow-up is needed to keep it fresh? Obviously, communications is changing every day almost, so you obviously have to keep up and keep this fresh.
Right, and I mean that's of course the worst part. I'm involved right now myself in an assessment of my program here at TCU, and I mean that is kind of my least favorite part of the job that I do. I mean it's tough, a lot of and especially I'll send you a couple of examples of plans that you can look at, and some of these things are so huge and big that I look at them and I'm thinking, I don't believe that anybody's really using them because they're so big and unwieldy. So that's one thing I would say is I think you can put all these pieces together, but I think as many pieces as you can, put them in the appendix. Keep the plan itself as lean and mean as you can, because if that thing can be represented in just a handful of pages, what you're doing, sort of the big global thing you're doing all the time, I think that's a much more effective way to do it. But I think what it does is when you sit down, every meeting that you have, every new thing that comes in that you're trying to do, new programming or new activities, it will help you build a vocabulary and mindset so that anything that comes in, you'll say, well, that fits right here. That fits easily with that mission statement. That fits easily with that thing we've already built. And I think it just speeds up your process in terms of implementing new things because you've already got stuff written down, you've got steps and guidelines. That's how you use it, is every new thing you have, you look at the plan to help you move faster. I think it can make you more efficient. If you big plan, I think those things just disappear and get buried under dust. So it's a great question.
And Valerie West from Troup County wants to know, where can she find some resources?
Well, we have a database that we put together, so again, I'll try to send some of that to Todd so that you can look at it. And you really can scour the web for great examples of things that work. There's also a link to something that's at a foundation that helps you build a strategic plan, and I'll share that with Todd. It gives you some of these audit exercises, because some of this stuff that I talked about early in the presentation maybe is just a way for you to brainstorm, to think outside the box that you find yourself in. I mean, we all find ourselves in a bubble that we have to operate in order to get through every day because we're so busy. And so these exercises can help you step outside the bubble, help you see the bubble a little bit more clearly, and help you intuit better how other people look at the information environment or the communication environment. So this exercise from this one foundation that I can share with Todd is actually, I don't know, it's like 12 or 15 pages, but it's a lot of blanks, and it leads you kind of through a thinking process and a brainstorming process, which I think is very helpful. So I'm happy to share that resource with you as well.
All right, that'd be great, and I will put whatever I get from Dr. Lambier's on our website, and then I'll make sure I send that link out to everybody who was on the webinar too, so they would have that information. We do have on the NACIO website, which is www.nacio.org, a lot of resources already for counties, media relations plans, social media plans. So these are the kind of things that maybe that will be components of your overall communications plan that Dr. Lambier is talking about. And we have another question just pop in from Johnny Delaney from Arizona. Our department covers many different services that are very different. For example, food inspection, wastewater, vector control. This is what you're talking about, the complexities of county government. This makes it more challenging in our department dealing or communicating with media, the public, and the different varied stakeholders. How to better deal with this as part of the plan?
I think if you can still have one or two primary spokespeople, whether that's a county manager or a county, maybe there's a great media person already in your county who can handle a lot of these inquiries. I mean, you obviously put them in the plan and they are, seen as sort of your chief spokespeople, but I think you deal with all the rest of that in terms of subject matter experts. And so it might mean that you do a lot of things in tandem with a subject matter expert. So whenever, there's something that comes up with food inspection, there is a really great person who maybe has some good media training, or maybe there's a really great person who's maybe not very good in terms of working with the media, but you would like them to get better because you need them. You need them to build credibility and authority instead of, always putting the PR person out there. So I think you can work that in as part of your plan. Like and you could have a group of those people that you meet on a quarterly basis to talk about some of the things you're working on so that everybody knows what those things are because they are so diverse and different from one another. That way your chief spokesperson kind of knows what's going on. Maybe that's a monthly conference call or something like that where you guys talk about those things, but then you also talk about how you're dealing with them, what's gone well over the past month or quarter and what hasn't gone so great. How can you all help and assist one another? And I think it also gives you backups for when those people are out of pocket or on vacation or that job is vacant where other people can help fill in too.
Excellent. These are great questions, and I appreciate all of them because we're recording this, and we'll put this on the NACO website. So again, the folks who aren't here will probably have had the same questions. So the fact that y'all are asking these and we're getting these answers on record is great. Jessica Corbett asks, great presentation. Do you have any recommendations for affordable tools that help automate tracking of measurables?
Sure. I think there's something, and I guess maybe you're talking here about digital media and things like that. I think Sprout Social is a fairly inexpensive metric system. You know, there's a Google Analytics University, and I think that's really useful. And I don't think it's that expensive to do that either, where you can kind of learn to use those metrics and build them as part of your daily or weekly or monthly routines, where you check those measurements, or you work with your IT person to kind of see, where most of where people are coming from into your digital spaces, what they are, typing into your search engine most often, where they go most often, what pages get the most visits on your website. I really feel like those are great things to know, and again, it kind of goes back to that different way of thinking about the communication model where the discussion is at the center. Like, what are people seeking? What do they need? And how can you continue to serve those needs by listening and looking at these analytics to see where they're going, where they stay the longest once they find what they need. That's a great listening tool. So Sprout Social's one, and if I think of other ones, I'll send at the top that I think are kind of inexpensive and easy to use too.
Hootsuite Pro is something that's out there too that allows you to, it's really a kind of an updating tool. It allows you to update various social media platforms using one software, but it also has analytics, and that may have something that may have what you're looking for too.
Yes, definitely.
And Dr. Lambiase, while we have a break here, could you go ahead and just say a little bit about the Texas Christian University Communicators Program?
Sure. We just started a program that we launched this past summer, and it's here at TCU, and it's called the Certified Public Communicator Program, and we developed it with the Texas Association of Municipal Information Officers. That's a group that also has county people working and as members as well. And so they were seeking some kind of certification program because I guess a lot of people within cities and counties, at least here in the state of Texas, whether they're engineers or accountants or parks people, they all have their own individual certification programs. And really the communicators didn't have anything here in the state of Texas, and we kind of started looking around the nation and realized that there really wasn't anything specifically for communicators in terms of a certification program. We do have the Certified Public Manager program here in the state of Texas, and I have taught as part of that. I've taught in that program, but not that many communication people go through it, so we saw a need and have designed a program with Tamio to meet that need. It's not simply a checkoff list of you show up for 95 hours of instruction, and as long as you're sitting in the classroom or doing something, through distance learning, you check it off and you get certified. It's a program. It's a residential program. You come here and live on the campus for 5 nights, parts of 6 days, and you're in a cohort of people. You're doing hands-on experiential learning. The first summer is kind of theory-based because we found that a lot of people who serve as communicators or find themselves becoming communicators within public sector agencies are people who maybe have come out of journalism, or maybe they don't even have a communication background. So it was a way to infuse the program with some theoretical background, but then when you have a lot of hands-on work and brainstorming, you actually write parts of a plan during that first summer, and then we send you off with sort of 3 homework assignments for the fall, and you come back to campus in January for just one night and a 2-day thing, or we can do a distance learning thing for that midwinter check-in. And we look at your drafts of your plans so far, and then during the second summer you come back for 1 more week, and we try to put your plan into action. We tweak it a little bit, and your organization gets a 3-year communication plan at the end of the program, and you get a certification from us. It's a 95-hour program, so it's 40 hours for 1 week in the first summer, 40 hours for 1 week in the second summer, and 15 hours in between as a check-in, either in an online version or on-site version.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions. I do want to say that Dr. Lambiase came to our NACIO meeting at the NACO conference, which just happened to be in Fort Worth last summer, and gave a presentation on the Certified Communicator Program. And a lot of the members, NACIO members who were in attendance at the time, were very impressed and have expressed an interest in attending that. So we're hopeful that NACIO can somehow partnership with this program and maybe get some of our members to go through it.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all, and if you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I'll be sending some resources to Todd for you. So thanks for the great questions. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Lambiase. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And like I say, just be on the lookout for that follow-up email that will have links to hopefully the new resources that we'll get and put on the NACIO website. So thank everybody for coming, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.